Listen, guys. So the way the news spins things today, you'll think Donald Trump is secretly Putin's best buddy. Washington, D.C. is some kind of safe, tourist friendly Disneyland, and activists are working night and day to save kids from being, well, black kids, I should say, being murdered in their own neighborhoods. But let's be real. That's all smoke and mirrors because the truth, Mark Rubio had to go on live TV and literally teach professional journalists how negotiations work. So Janine Pirro exposed the fact that DC has become a graveyard for teenagers with black kids being gunned down and nobody saying a word. Now states are sending in their National Guard because the city's gotten so bad soldiers are patrolling the streets. So let's break this down slowly and clearly because politics isn't really complicated. It's like life, it's family, it's common sense. And once you see the pattern, you'll never unsee it. So I want you guys to check out this clip with Mark Rubio first.
Well, first of all, the Russians are already facing very severe consequences. There's not a single sanction that's been lifted. And not one. I mean, they're facing all the same sanctions that have been in place today. All the American support continues for Ukraine. And ultimately, look, if we're not going to be able to reach an agreement here at any point, then there are going to be consequences. Not only the consequences of the war continuing, but the consequences of all those sanctions continuing and potentially new sanctions on top of it as well. But what we're trying to do right now is end the war. And in order to end the war, you've got to give every opportunity that exists. You have to be open to any opportunity that exists to bring it about. And here's the thing to remind everybody, and when the president says this is not our war, but let's be frank, this is not our war. The United States is not in a war. Ukraine is in a war, and we've been supporting Ukraine. We happen to be in the role of the only country in the world, with the only leader in the world, that can actually bring Putin to a table to even discuss these things. Now, the president has traveled, all the way to Alaska, all the way back, has dedicated months and months of work, him, our entire team on this matter, because we want to see an end to the war. But if tomorrow the war continues, life in America will not be fundamentally altered. So I think that what we have to understand is that this has been a priority for this president because he wants to promote peace. He wants to promote the end of a war. And I think we should be happy that we have a president that's trying to promote peace and bring a war to an end.
Shout out to Mark Rubio because Rubio explained something so basic. You'll think even a college freshman could get it because Russia is still under sanctions. Nothing has been lifted, and America is not a war. It's not at war. Ukraine is. So if you think about that, it's like your neighbors in a fist fight. And you're not the one throwing punches, but you're lending them water and bandages. That's America with Ukraine. And we're supporting, not fighting. But the media wants you to believe Trump is secretly in the ring throwing punches for Russia. And why? Because war sells. War gets clicks, peace doesn't. Back in Iraq, they slapped flashy Operation Iraqi Freedom graphics on the corner of your TV. And war was treated like a video game. So the Ukraine war, same playbook. Endless experts, endless fear. If Trump negotiates peace, show is over. So now I want you guys to see Trump basically said if he got Russia to give up Moscow, the media would call it a bad deal. So as you guys see, and I'll share on my screen, what Trump had to say in this matter, if I got Russia to give up Moscow as part of the deal, the fake news and their partner, the radical left Democrats, would say I made a terrible mistake and a very bad deal. That's why they are the fake news. Also, they should talk about the 6 wars, etc. I just stopped. Make America great again. So Trump's point, no matter what he does, they spin it. It's like parenting a rebellious teenager. If you give them freedom, you don't care. If you set boundaries, you're too strict. You can't win. So that's Trump versus the media. And the media has built this entire brand on Trump equals bad. And if they ever admit he did something right, the whole house of cards collapses. And they have to admit they lied, so they twist everything. And you remember COVID because Trump fast-tracked vaccines and rapid tests. The media mocked him. When Biden rolled out the same vaccines, Suddenly it was heroic. Same product, different president, opposite spin. And that's why you ignore the spin and look at the results. And the fact is, Russia didn't invade under Trump. That's the scoreboard that matters, right? So now I want you guys to check out another clip when it comes to Mike Pence and what he had to say in regards of his take on things.
Ambassador Witkoff say the meeting
Thanks
was.
for having me on, Jake.
You just heard Ambassador Witkoff say the meeting was a big success. President Trump says the meeting was a 10 out of 10. What rating would you give it?
Well, first, I think the president should be commended for pursuing peace in Ukraine. This president has already secured peace agreements in Africa, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. I think he deserves credit as leader of the free world for not giving up on Ukraine, particularly, Jake, since there are many voices in and around the administration that would have cut Ukraine loose months ago. So I want to commend the president for trying to make progress. I must tell you, I would have liked to have seen a ceasefire, but the truth is that no deal is better than a bad deal. What we heard Ambassador Witkoff describe is encouraging, that there was at least an assent in Putin's and Trump's meeting to the United States providing security guarantees. And clearly the president didn't forfeit anything having to do with America's national security or with the security of our allies in Eastern Europe in the midst of this war. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's important to remember the bad guy here is Putin. Putin launched an unprovoked, brutal invasion more than 3 years ago. I've traveled to Ukraine twice. I've literally walked the streets, seen the aftermath of that brutal invasion. And now more than ever, America and our allies need to stand strongly with Ukraine and create the conditions for a just and lasting peace.
You said.
Okay, so basically, Pence is arguing for hammering Russia harder and pouring more money into Ukraine. And that's like saying, forget buying groceries for our kids. Let's spend the paycheck fixing the neighbor's roof. Noble, maybe. Smart, no. This is this is the establishment GOP talking, or the Republican Party. They love endless wars because wars mean defense contracts, big donors, and we are the world police bragging rights. And it's about DC's wallet, not yours. If you look at Afghanistan, 20 years, trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives, and how did it end? The Taliban took Kabul in a weekend. And that's what endless war buys you. That's why Trump broke the cycle. He was the first president in decades who didn't start a new war. So now I want you guys to see in regards of CNN saying Putin won just for standing on the red carpet with Trump, which I find very weird, but I want you guys to check it out.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. You don't even pay attention to it anymore. But I will tell you this, Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine. He's already on the world stage. He has the world's largest tactical nuclear arsenal in the world and the second largest strategic nuclear arsenal in the world. He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, oh, it elevates him, well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin. That's just common sense. I shouldn't even have to say it. So people can say whatever they want. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to get the Russian side to agree to things that they don't want to agree to if we're going to have peace. If not, there'll just be a war. They'll keep killing each other. And life will go on in America and in the rest of the world, but not for Ukraine. So the president has invested a lot of time in trying to bring an end to this war. He deserves credit for doing that. He gets criticism for doing that. He could have just let this war go on. The president could have just said, this is Biden's war. It started under him. We'll do what we can for Ukraine, but we're going to focus on other things. He could have easily said that. But he's the only leader in the world that can get Putin to a meeting to talk about serious things.
That is true. So that's like saying the quarterback won just for showing up at the coin toss. But no, because Putin already has nukes, already runs a war, and already has a seat on the United Nations, and he doesn't need Trump for legitimacy. But the media wants you to believe that talking equals surrender. Because if peace talks succeed, Trump gets the credit. And they can't let that happen. But history proves them wrong because Nixon went to China. Critics say he legitimized Mayo, and the reality is he reshaped the world. So talking doesn't mean surrender. Talking means you're serious about results. But now I want to get to this next clip about Mark Rubio refusing to name concessions on live TV. Check it out.
Can you name any concessions that Vladimir Putin made during this meeting? Have any
I wouldn't name them on your
concessions?
program.
Have any
I
concessions
wouldn't name
been
them on your
asked?
program. Why would I do that?
Where is the
Well, of
pressure?
course, because you can't have a peace agreement. No, you can't have a peace agreement unless both sides give and get. You can't have a peace agreement unless both sides make concessions. That's a fact. That's true in virtually any negotiation. If not, it's just called surrender. And neither side is going to surrender. So both sides are going to have to make concessions. So of course concessions were asked. But what utility would there be of me going on a program and tell you we've wagged our finger at Putin and told him you must do this and you must do that? It's only going to make it harder and less likely that they're going to agree to these things. So these negotiations, as much as everyone would love it to be a live pay-per-view event, these discussions only work best when they are conducted privately in serious negotiations in which people who have to go back and respond to constituencies, because even totalitarian governments have constituencies they have to respond to. People have to go back and defend these agreements that they make, and so and figure out a way to explain them to people. So we need to create space for concessions to be made. But of course, concessions were asked.
Now, when you look at that, right, because he said, of course, concessions was asked. So when you look at how Mark Rubio is basically handling the media, because the media tries this little tired little trick. They throw in some shallow gotcha question, hoping he'll slip up and they can turn it into a headline. And Rubio basically had to give them negotiations 101 because he explained, like I said, Russia is still under sanctions. None of them have been lifted. America is not at war. Ukraine is, and we're supporting them, but this isn't our war. And simple, right? But the media acts like Trump is secretly handing Moscow the keys to the White House. And here's the thing: negotiating peace means both sides give something. That's not surrender, that's reality. So if you ever argue with a friend over the last slice of pizza, if nobody budge, guess what? The pizza falls on the floor and nobody eats. So that's negotiations. You give a little, they gave a little, boom. But the media doesn't want peace. They want optics, right? They want the photo op to matter more than the actual result. Oh no, Putin got to stand on the red carpet next to Trump. Like, it's just bull crap. So Putin is already on the world stage. The man is running a war. You think a handshake makes or break him? That's just stupid, right? So when you sit there and ask him, can you name concessions Putin made? And Rubio, thank God, says no. Of course, you don't broadcast concessions on live TV. That's like negotiating a raise and walking into your boss' office saying, "Hey, just so you know, I'll accept $10 less, but less than what I'm asking." It's the dumbest thing ever. But the media, they want Trump to basically live stream the negotiations like it's a fight. Like he said, pay-per-view. It's just unreal, right? So when you look at the whole thing of things and you actually seeing how it plays out, business is always supposed to be private and negotiated behind closed doors, right? Because that means both parties are operating with um truths or operating with good intentions more so. I mean, if you disclose everything you negotiate, are you really operating for the very thing that you attended to, such as peace, or is just more so for show? Right. So the person or the individual that you're negotiating with, I don't think you want to be looking a certain way if your intention is really what it say it is, because your actions will show if your intention is really what you say they are, because actions speak louder than words. So the media know this because that's like playing poker and saying, by the way, I'll fold if you bet $100. Game over. So they don't actually expect answers. They just want Trump weakened. And that's sabotage disguised as journalism. And negotiations belong behind closed doors, not on CNN's rating games. So now I want to get to the Democrats when it comes to Van Hollen and Chris Murphy, because they say Trump got played, right? So I'm going to show you guys what Van Hollen had to say first. Check it out.
I'd like to move to the summit, if you will. You're on the Foreign Relations Committee. You watched that summit, I'm sure. What is your reaction to what happened?
Well, Martha, there's no sugarcoating this. Donald Trump once again got played by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin got the red carpet treatment on American soil, but we got no ceasefire, no imminent meeting between Putin and Zelensky. All the threatened sanctions that Donald Trump talked about apparently have been set aside. Donald Trump got flattered by Vladimir Putin, but when it comes to Ukraine and our European allies, this was a setback. I do believe that Congress now, the Senate in particular, should move forward on bipartisan legislation that has over 60 senators as co-sponsors that would impose sanctions on Russia and Vladimir Putin.
And we'll see whether that happens. But just very quickly, aren't personal relations important?
Personal relations are important, and I have no objection to people talking, but you want to have a clear objective in mind. Clearly, Vladimir Putin had a clear objective in mind, and he came to Alaska and gave up nothing, whereas, Donald Trump said he had hoped to do, ceasefire. He'd hoped to fly in Zelensky, maybe even while Vladimir Putin was there. None of that happened. And meanwhile, they've taken the pressure off the sanctions. I mean, again, Donald Trump was supposed to impose sanctions on Russia weeks ago now, and nothing. So this was a victory for Vladimir Putin.
Now check out what Chris Murphy had to say before I give you my take.
So much for being here on a very big week. You just heard my conversation with Secretary Rubio. We specifically started talking about the fact that President Trump initially said he wanted a ceasefire agreement. Now he wants a broader peace deal. Secretary Rubio defending that approach, basically saying the Russians wouldn't agree to a ceasefire. Do you think that it's the right strategy to now focus on that broader peace deal?
That meeting was a disaster. It was an embarrassment for the United States. It was a failure. Putin got everything he wanted. I mean, first of all, he wanted that photo op, right? He wanted to be absolved of his war crimes in front of the world. He was invited to the United States. War criminals are not normally invited to the United States of America. He is intentionally murdering civilians. He's kidnapping children. And now he got to stand next to the president of the United States, legitimized in the view of the world. Second, he didn't have to give up anything, nothing. Right? President Trump said he wanted a ceasefire. It appears the ceasefire wasn't even seriously discussed.
All right, so I'm going to leave it there. Translation. They want Trump to fail. They'd rather see endless war than admit he might succeed. For Democrats, the enemy isn't Putin, it's Trump. Their whole 2024 playbook is Trump equals weak. And if he negotiates peace, that narrative dies. Remember Jerusalem? Trump moves the U.S. embassy. Critics scream chaos in a state of strengthened ties in the Middle East. And he proved them wrong then, and he's proving them wrong now. And the truth is, Democrats would rather see America lose than Trump win, and that tells you all you need to know. So now I want to go on to the next thing when it comes to Janine Pirro.
President Trump understands that in D.C., it is the minority community that is suffering. Just the other day, I said, give me a picture of all of the teens, everyone 19 and under, who were killed by gunfire. Okay, and in 2024, there were 29 of them, all teens killed by gunfire. 2025, so far, there are 19, all teens killed by gunfire. Every one of them African American, every one of them minority community. And I'm going to stun you. 70% of these homicides of 45 young minority kids in the last year and 7 months. have not been solved. The ones who shot and killed them and took their lives from them are still walking the streets. We haven't arrested them. We haven't taken the guns from them. And that's what the president understands. And that's my mission. President Trump understands that in D.C., it is the minority community that is suffering. Just the other day,
All right. So I wanted you guys to hear that, just the beginning part again. But that's not just statistics. That's classrooms of kids going. So imagine lining up 29 teenagers in a gym and now picture them all dead within a single year. Another 19 the next year, mothers burying sons, fathers grieving daughters, dreams cut short before they can even finish high school, and the killers, 7 out of 10 cases unsolved. So which means most of these murderers are still walking the streets. So imagine being a parent in DC, your kid is going, the murderer is still out there free as you and me. And now here's the part that should make every American furious. Where are the activists? Where's the Black Lives Matter? Where's the L Sharpton? Where's the NCAACP? Silent. Why? Because these kids don't fit the narrative. They weren't killed by the cops. There weren't a story that could be spun into a systemic racism, and they were killed by other black kids in their own neighborhoods. And that doesn't raise money or bring media coverage. And the truth is, tragedy is only useful to them if it can be weaponized. Otherwise, it's ignored. So think back to the summer of 2020, right? Cities burnt, billions in damage because of George Floyd. Every camera was rolling, but every single weekend in Chicago, black kids are shot. Sometimes 30, 40, 50 people wounded in a single weekend. So where are the marches for them? Where's the outrage? Nowhere. Because their deaths can't be spun into a political story. And I don't believe no one death should be spun into a political story. I just think the awareness of individuals dying at an unprecedented amount, unprecedentedly and at large amounts, should be the march in its entirety. And unjust death in regards of individuals' lives getting took in a way, period, innocently, and just being the victims that they have come to be, happen to be. Unfortunately, the march should be about that. So here's the conservative takeaway. Law and order is not racist. Law and order is mercy. So when crime runs wild, it's the poorest neighborhoods, often black neighborhoods, that suffer first. So safety is a right and protecting life is a duty. And ignoring it because it doesn't fit your politics, to me, that's just evil, right? So now I want to get to the National Guard being employed in D.C. because you have 3 states, I believe it's 6 states now, but you got states like West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio who send hundreds of National Guard troops to D.C., military vehicles on the street, guardsmen carrying weapons. Check it out.
Agreeing to send hundreds of members from their National Guard to Washington, D.C. This is all part of Trump's larger effort to crack down on the crime in the nation's capital. In total, over 600 guardsmen have been pledged on top of the 800 already activated. This comes as hundreds took to the streets of D.C. Saturday, protesting the militarization of law enforcement and the Trump administration's mass.
So there you have it. The capital of the United States, the city that represents freedom to the world, has gotten so unsafe that soldiers basically are needing to restore order. And tourists come to see the White House and monuments, and instead they're seeing guardsmen with rifles, and that's how bad things are, right? You would think the place where the president is able to lay his head would be the most safest as the capital. And what's the media reaction? Dictator, authoritarian, but really, let's be honest here. Really? Because where was all this outrage when Democrat governors deployed the guard during COVID to keep people locked down? Where was the outrage when troops patrolled during riots? Back then, it was responsible leadership. Now, because it's Trump, it's fascism, hypocrisy at its finest. So now I want you guys to see when it comes to this whole dictatorship narrative of Jamal Bowman said Trump's using a hammer instead of a scalpel, and basically saying that Trump is a dictator and so
Because
forth.
one of the most important things in policing, when you talk to whether they're police or just people who follow, pay attention to policing a lot and write articles and things about it, is that they should feel like a part of the community, right? What we're seeing, when I go on 14th Street nearby where I live, what I see is it looks like, oh, we're under siege, right? That's what it looks like and feels like to folks. And what's so interesting about this is DC, and this is according to WTOP, is still waiting for Congress to restore $1 billion with the B in funding during their crime crackdown. So a lot of that money would probably go to dealing with some of this crime. Congressman, talk to us about the dichotomy of that, because we had Muriel Bowser on last Sunday before the president made his announcement. She talked about the things that they want from the federal government, the money that they need, and this $1 billion will go a long way to help it.
Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are directly responsible for withholding the $1 billion that D.C. has a right to. With that $1 billion, you can hire more law enforcement. You can also support families with housing security and food security and education and job programs. The other thing is this. Another thing that brings down violent crime is something called violence interrupters. Yeah. And President Biden had an office, an anti-gun violence office that Donald Trump got rid of when he came in. Greg Jackson, who's a friend of mine, was a deputy director of that office. Right here in New York City, you have people like Erica Ford and Kay Bain who are doing exceptional violence interruption work. In Yonkers, you have Jonathan Alvarez, 914 United. So if the president is really serious about dealing with violent crime, like now, in certain areas, again, one murder, one violent crime, too many. Yeah. So let's use a scalpel. Let's be strategic. Let's go into those communities with people who are from those communities to help with the issue of violent crime.
Hell no, we're not using no damn scalpel. Excuse my language, family, but I'm just gonna keep it real with you. Scalpel my ass. That scalpel already failed. DC leaders tried it. Chicago tried it. LA tried it. Community programs, slogans, soft policing. And where did that get us? Kids in coffins, families shattered, and streets unsafe. And I'm just passionate. You know what I'm saying? Because he's just speaking in pure ignorance. Sometimes you don't need a scalpel, you need a hammer. And if your house is on fire, you don't call a doctor with tweezers, you call the fire department with a hose. So that's what the guard is, the hose on the flames. And guess what? It's already working because residents are saying they hear fewer gunshots at night. Streets are cleaner. One man walked across the city and said for the first time in years he didn't see gangs, drugs, or violence. That's not dictatorship. That's deliverance. That's deliverance. So why are critics mad? Because if Trump succeeds, their narrative dies. They built their whole brand on Trump is dangerous. If he's the one who restores safety in DC, they're exposed. That's why they scream. It's not about the people, it's about power. Law and order is what allows freedom to exist. Without safety, there's no liberty. Without safety, kids don't grow up, business don't thrive, communities don't survive, and Trump gets that. His critics don't, and that's the difference. So let's connect the dots because here's the bigger picture. Rubio showed that negotiations are about leverage, not optics. Janine Pirro, you heard her speak. She showed that activists are silent when black kids are murdered because it doesn't fit their politics. The Guard showed that law and order delivers results even while elites cry dictator. And the elites chase appearances. The media chases ratings. The activists chase politics. But reality, America First policies deliver results. So here's the bottom line. Negotiating peace requires leverage, not weakness. Protecting communities requires strength, not slogans. Leading a country means putting America first. That's why the establishment and the media fear Trump, because results expose their failure. So let me ask you, do you think Trump's negotiation style is smarter than the old beg and appease way? And do you think the National Guard should stay in D.C. until the city is truly safe? And why do you think the activists are silent when black children are murdered in their own neighborhood? Drop your answers in the comments, because while the media has their narrative, we have the truth. On that note, family, peace.